3 days later, Ji-won stood on the bridge of a coalition transport ship, watching the stars blur past as they traveled through hyperspace. She still wore her gray hoodie, though now it felt less like comfort and more like armor. The fabric had become a symbol. Everyone who saw it knew what it meant. She was not alone. Captain Cho had assembled a team of 12 humans for this mission. There were teachers, medical workers, therapists, and social workers. All of them had experience with children. All of them volunteered immediately when they heard about the mission. Daeun came too, leading a small security team. She promised Ji-won that her job was to protect, not to fight. The Velhari sent an escort of 6 warriors, led by war leader Thrawn. Kira-shan could not come because she had diplomatic duties, but she sent her best fighters to keep the humans safe. Rin and Kai came along too. Kira-shan insisted that the cubs needed to see what their new extended family did. It was part of their education. Right now, both cubs were napping in Ji-won's quarters. They had their own room, their own beds, everything they needed. But every night they ended up sleeping in Ji-won's hoodie pocket or curled up next to her. The human crew found it adorable. The Velhari warriors found it confusing but acceptable. Ambassador Taeyang Kim stood next to Ji-won, looking at the star charts. Their destination was a planet called Marin 4, a contested border world where Velhari and Tarkesh forces had been fighting for 2 years. The latest battle left hundreds dead and almost 60 children orphaned. Both sides agreed to a temporary ceasefire, the ambassador explained. They will allow us to establish a care facility for the orphans. Neutral ground. But neither side trusts the other, and they barely trust the coalition. You and your team will be living in a war zone, Dr. Park. I understand, Ji-won said quietly. But those children need help now. They cannot wait for peace to be negotiated. Ambassador Taeyang Kim nodded. He had changed since the incident on Aurora Station. He seemed less worried about politics and more focused on doing what was right. Ji-won's simple determination had affected him. The coalition is formally establishing the Human Caregiver Corps, he said. You will be the first official member. The program already has 5,000 volunteers from Earth. More are signing up every day. People want to help. Ji-won felt overwhelmed again. 5,000 people, all because 2 cubs climbed into her pocket. It seemed impossible that one small moment could create such big changes. The ship dropped out of hyperspace near Marin 4. The planet looked beautiful from orbit, with blue oceans and green continents. But as they got closer, Ji-won saw the scars of war. Burned forests, ruined cities, gray smoke rising from fresh battlefields. The care facility was in a neutral zone between the 2 armies. It was a group of temporary buildings surrounded by energy shields. Both Velhari and Tarkesh guards watched from their respective sides, weapons ready. The tension was so thick Ji-won could almost feel it even from the ship. They landed in the center of the compound. As Ji-won walked down the ramp with her team, she saw the orphans for the first time. About 60 children of various ages, half Velhari and half Tarkesh, all gathered in a courtyard. They looked scared and lost. Many had injuries. All had seen terrible things. The Tarkesh children looked similar to Velhari, but with key differences. Their fur was darker, almost black, and they had longer tails. Their ears were more pointed. But the biggest difference was their eyes. Where Velhari had golden eyes, Tarkesh had silver. Right now, those eyes stared at the new arrivals with suspicion and fear. The Velhari cubs stayed close to their own kind, avoiding the Tarkesh cubs. The Tarkesh cubs did the same. 2 groups of children who should have been playing together, separated by generations of hatred taught by their parents. Ji-won felt her heart break a little. These were just children. They had lost everything. And still, they could not comfort each other because of politics and old wars. A coalition mediator approached, a tall insectoid being similar to Ambassador Vrextal. His name was Krikcha, and he managed the facility. The human team welcome, Krikcha said in his clicking voice. The situation is difficult. The children are traumatized. They do not trust us. They do not trust each other. Many have stopped eating. Some will not speak. We need help desperately. Ji-won looked at her team. They all nodded, ready to work. This was what they came for. Show us where we can set up, Ji-won said, and bring us any children who are struggling the most. We will start there. The first child they brought was a young Velhari female, maybe 5 years old. Her name was Sela. She had not spoken since watching her parents die in a bombing. She sat in a corner of the medical building, her face buried in her knees, not responding to anyone. Jiwon sat down on the floor next to Sela. Not too close, but close enough. She did not speak at first. She just sat quietly, letting the child get used to her presence. After a few minutes, Jiwon started humming softly. It was a lullaby from Earth, simple and gentle. Sela's ears twitched. She lifted her head slightly, looking at Jiwon from the corner of her eye. Jiwon kept humming, not looking directly at the child. She had learned from her research that direct eye contact could feel threatening to traumatized younglings. Slowly, carefully, Sela scooted a little closer. Then a little more. Finally, she pressed against Jiwon's side and started crying. It was the first emotion she had shown in days. Jiwon wrapped her arm around the small body and held her while she cried. It took almost an hour, but eventually Sela fell asleep, exhausted from grief. The other humans worked with different children, using the same gentle approach. They did not push or demand. They simply made themselves available, warm and calm and safe. One by one, the children started responding. By evening, something unexpected happened. Rin and Kai had been playing in the courtyard, supervised by Da-un. A young Tarkesh cub, braver than the others, approached them. The Velhari guards tensed, ready to intervene. The Tarkesh guards did the same from their side. But Rin, who had spent days around humans and learned to trust them, did not run away. Instead, Rin looked at Da-un. The human nodded encouragingly. Rin turned back to the Tarkesh cub and chirped a greeting. The Tarkesh cub chirped back. They stared at each other for a moment. Then they started playing, chasing each other around the courtyard like all young creatures do. The guards on both sides watched in shock. Velhari and Tarkesh children never played together. Never. More cubs joined them, both species mixing together. They played simple games, shared toys, and laughed. The sound of children laughing filled the compound for the first time since it was built. Adults from both armies stood at their posts and stared, not believing what they saw. War leader Thrawn stood next to Captain Cho, watching his daughter play with Tarkesh cubs. His face showed complex emotions. "I was taught to hate the Tarkesh from birth," he said quietly. "I have killed many of them in battle. I have lost friends and family to their attacks. But watching these cubs play together, I wonder if we have all been fools." "Children do not hate naturally," Captain Cho replied. "They learn it from adults. If they can learn hate, they can learn peace instead." Over the next few days, the human team worked with all the orphans. They provided medical care, emotional support, and most importantly, comfort. The children, both Velhari and Tarkesh, started seeking out the humans whenever they felt scared or sad. The humans never turned any child away. Jiwon spent most of her time with the children who were struggling the most. She barely slept, always available when a nightmare woke a frightened cub or when someone needed to talk about their lost families. Her hoodie pocket became a refuge for the youngest orphans, a safe space where they could hide when the world felt too big and scary. Something else started happening. The adult soldiers from both armies would come to the fence line and watch. They saw their children playing together, laughing together, comforted by the same humans. Some of the soldiers started talking to each other through the fence. Just small conversations at first, asking about the weather, commenting on the children. Then one day, a Tarkesh soldier asked a Velhari soldier if he had any cubs. The Velhari said yes, 2 daughters back home. The Tarkesh soldier had a son. They showed each other pictures. They talked about how hard it was to be away from their families, fighting a war that seemed to have no end. Ambassador Taeyang Kim watched all of this and recorded everything. This was what humanity could offer the galaxy. Not weapons or technology, but the ability to remind people of their shared connections, to show them that their enemies were just people too, people with families and hopes and fears. On the 7th day, representatives from both the Velhari Empire and the Tarkesh Alliance arrived to inspect the facility. They were military leaders, hard and cold from years of war. They came expecting to see their orphaned children being held in barely acceptable conditions. Instead, they found children playing together. They found Velhari cubs sleeping peacefully with human caregivers. They found Tarkesh cubs laughing and healthy and safe. Both delegations walked through the compound in silence, trying to process what they saw. A Velhari general approached Jiwon while she sat in the courtyard with a group of mixed cubs. They were all cuddled around her, listening to her tell a story from Earth. The general was old, with gray streaks in his fur. Ji-won sat frozen at her desk, staring down at the two cubs sleeping peacefully in her hoodie pocket. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Outside her laboratory, the sounds of searching grew louder. Heavy footsteps, sharp voices speaking in the Velhari language, metal clanging against metal as doors were thrown open. She reached for her communication device, then stopped. Her hand shook slightly. If she called Daun now, her friend would tell the Velhari immediately. Warriors would rush into her lab with weapons drawn. They would see their cubs in her pocket and think the worst. Ji-won knew how it would look. A human scientist with missing alien children hidden in her clothing. No explanation would sound believable, but she could not keep them hidden either. That would be even worse. The longer she waited, the more guilty she would seem. Ji-won closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had to do the right thing, even if it was scary. She had to protect these cubs, and that meant getting them back to their mother safely. One of the cubs stirred in her pocket. It made a soft sound, something between a purr and a sigh. The sound was so peaceful, so content. Ji-won looked down again. The cubs were not scared. They were not crying or trying to escape. They were sleeping like this was the safest place in the world. Why? Ji-won wondered. Why would alien cubs from a species that trusted no one climb into a stranger's pocket and fall asleep? It did not make sense. In all her research, she had never seen behavior like this. Young creatures stayed close to their parents. They feared unknown beings. That was basic survival instinct. The door to her lab burst open. Ji-won jumped in her chair, instinctively wrapping her arms around her middle to protect the pocket. Daeun rushed in, her face red from running. Still nothing? Daeun asked, breathing hard. We've searched everywhere. 3 levels, hundreds of rooms. No sign of them. The Velhari are talking about searching every human's quarters personally. Captain Cho is trying to keep them calm, but Ambassador Taeyang Kim looks ready to collapse from stress. Ji-won opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Daeun looked at her closely. Are you okay? You look strange. I found them, Ji-won whispered. Daeun froze. What? Where? Ji-won slowly pulled open her hoodie pocket. Daeun stepped closer and looked inside. Her eyes went wide. Oh no. Oh, Ji-won, no. I did not take them, Ji-won said quickly. I did not even know they were there. I was working. They must have climbed in during the reception this morning. I was so focused on my research that I did not notice the weight. I know how this looks, but you have to believe me. Daeun rubbed her face with both hands. I believe you. I know you would never hurt anyone, especially children. But the Velhari will not believe it. They will think you stole their cubs. This could start a war, Ji-won. What should I do? Ji-won asked. She felt tears building behind her eyes but refused to cry. Crying would not help anyone. Daeun thought for a moment. We need to contact Captain Cho directly. She can help manage this situation. She can talk to the Velhari and explain before things get violent. Do not move. Do not let anyone else see those cubs until the captain gets here. Daeun pulled out her secure communication device and spoke in a low, urgent voice. Ji-won could only hear parts of the conversation. She heard her own name several times. She heard Daeun say words like delicate and immediately and potential incident. While they waited, one of the cubs woke up completely. It climbed halfway out of the pocket, balancing its small paws on Ji-won's leg. Big golden eyes stared up at her face. The cub tilted its head, studying her. Then it reached up with one paw and patted her cheek gently. Ji-won could not help but smile a little. The cub was so small, so trusting. Its fur was incredibly soft. When it patted her cheek again, she felt tiny claws, but they were retracted. The cub was being careful not to hurt her. It likes you, Daeun said, watching with an expression that was half amazement and half worry. I have never seen a Velhari cub act like that with a stranger. Usually they hiss and hide. The cub made a chirping sound and tried to climb higher, wanting to be held. Without thinking, Ji-won lifted it out of her pocket and held it against her chest. The cub immediately snuggled against her hoodie and started purring. The sound vibrated through the fabric. The second cub woke up and made a crying noise, upset that its sibling had left. Ji-won carefully scooped it out too. Now she held both cubs, one in each arm. They were surprisingly heavy for their size. They pressed close to her body, seeking warmth and comfort. This is surreal, Daeun muttered. I am watching you cuddle the most dangerous species children like they are earth kittens. And they are letting you. No, they are happy about it. What is happening? Before Ji-won could answer, heavy footsteps thundered in the hallway. Multiple beings were running toward her lab. The cubs heard it too. They pressed tighter against Ji-won, making nervous sounds. She instinctively held them closer, one hand cradling each small head. "Stay calm," Daeun said, moving to stand between Ji-won and the door. "Whatever happens, do not move suddenly. Do not raise your voice. Let me handle this." The door exploded inward. Not literally, but it slammed open with such force that it hit the wall and bounced back. 4 Velhari warriors rushed in, each one enormous and armed. Their fur bristled with aggression. Their ears were flat against their heads. Their lips pulled back to show sharp fangs. War leader Thrawn was at the front. He was even bigger than Ji-won remembered. His shoulders so broad he barely fit through the doorway. Scars crossed his face and arms. His eyes locked onto Ji-won and the cubs she held. For a moment nobody moved, then Thrawn roared. The sound was so loud that Ji-won felt it in her chest. It was rage and fear mixed together, the sound of a father who thought his children were in danger. The other warriors raised their weapons, strange devices that glowed with energy. "Do not move," Daeun shouted, stepping forward with her hands raised. "Nobody shoot. The cubs are safe. They are unharmed." Thrawn snarled something in his language. His weapon pointed directly at Ji-won. "Human took our cubs. Human will die. She did not take them," Daeun said firmly. They climbed into her pocket on their own. "Look at them. Do they look scared? Do they look hurt?" Ji-won wanted to speak, wanted to defend herself, but fear locked her throat. She could only hold the cubs and try not to shake. One of the cubs, the braver one, lifted its head and looked at the Velhari warriors. It made a happy chirping sound and waved its small paw. The warriors stopped. Confusion replaced anger on their faces. Cubs did not act happy when they were in danger. Cubs did not wave at rescuers. They cried and reached out to be saved. Another voice came from the hallway, sharp with authority. High Matriarch Kirishan pushed past her warriors. She was even more impressive up close. Her golden fur seemed to glow in the laboratory lights. Her yellow eyes blazed with a mother's fury. She saw Ji-won holding her cubs. She saw the cubs snuggled against the human's chest, purring softly. Kirishan stopped walking. Her mouth opened slightly in shock. "Rinkai." Kirishan's voice was softer now, filled with relief and confusion. She spoke in her own language, calling to her children. The cubs looked at their mother. They chirped in recognition. But when Kirishan stepped forward with her arms out, expecting them to reach for her, something unexpected happened. The Shire cub, the one called Kai, burrowed deeper into Ji-won's hoodie. It made a worried sound and clung to the fabric with its small claws. Kirishan froze. Her arms slowly lowered. She stared at her child clinging to a human stranger with an expression Ji-won could not read. Was it hurt, anger, disbelief? What did you do to them? Kirishan demanded. What magic did you use? What chemical? Cubs do not bond with outsiders. They do not seek comfort from other species. This is not natural. Ji-won finally found her voice. It came out small and shaky. I did nothing. I promise. They climbed into my pocket during the reception. I did not even know they were there until a few minutes ago. I would never hurt a child. Any child, lies, Thrawn growled. Humans are clever. Humans are manipulators. You did something to make them trust you. Captain Hyojin Cho arrived then, breathing hard from running. Behind her came Ambassador Taeyoung Kim, looking pale and terrified. The small laboratory was now crowded with too many people. The air felt thick with tension. High Matriarch, Captain Cho said, bowing respectfully. I understand you are upset. I understand this looks suspicious. But Dr. Park is one of my best scientists. She would never harm anyone. Please let us investigate what happened before we make accusations. Kirishan's tail lashed back and forth, a sign of agitation. Investigate what? My cubs were missing for 3 hours. Now I find them in a human's pocket, acting like she is their mother. This human has done something unforgivable. The cub called Ren reached up and touched Ji-won's face again. It made a contented sound. Ji-won felt tears finally escape and roll down her cheeks. She was not crying from fear anymore. She was crying because she knew she was about to lose these small creatures who trusted her, and there was nothing she could do about it. Ji-won Park sat at her desk in the laboratory, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Outside the window, space looked endless and black, with tiny stars scattered like dust. Aurora Station floated in the middle of nowhere, a giant wheel spinning slowly in the darkness. Inside, it was warm and busy. People from 47 different alien species walked through the hallways, talked in strange languages, and worked together. Ji-won pulled her gray hoodie tighter around herself. She always wore it. The fabric was soft and comfortable, like a blanket she could carry everywhere. Some people on the station thought it looked unprofessional. They said a scientist should wear a lab coat or a uniform, but Ji-won did not care. The hoodie made her feel safe. Her work was simple but important. She studied how young aliens behaved. She watched videos of baby creatures from different worlds. She wrote notes about how they played, how they slept, and how they learned. Most scientists thought her research was silly. They wanted to study important things like weapons or engines or medicine. But Ji-won believed that understanding children was the key to understanding everyone. Today was a big day on the station. The Velhari had arrived. Ji-won had never met a Velhari before, but everyone talked about them. They were tall and covered in fur like cats, but they walked on two legs and spoke clearly. They were fierce warriors, proud and dangerous. Their empire controlled 12 star systems, and they never ever trusted outsiders. The Velhari were here to sign a treaty with Earth. If everything went well, human ships could use the Chiron Passage, a shortcut through space that would save months of travel time. It was important for trade, for exploration, for everything. Ambassador Tae-young Kim had been preparing for weeks. He looked stressed every time Ji-won saw him in the hallways. His hair was turning gray from worry. Earlier that morning, there had been a reception in the main hall. All the important people gathered to meet the Velhari delegation. Ji-won had to attend because Captain Hyejin Cho said everyone on the station should show respect to their guests. Ji-won did not like crowds, but she went anyway. The Velhari were impressive. Their leader was called High Matriarch Kirishan. She was 7 feet tall with golden fur that had silver stripes running through it. Her eyes were bright yellow and sharp. She looked like she could see everything at once. Next to her stood war leader Thrawn, even taller and covered in scars. He carried weapons on his belt and watched everyone with suspicion. But what caught Ji-won's attention were the cubs. 2 small Velhari children stood close to their mother. They had russet-colored fur, big round ears, and curious eyes. They looked about 4 years old, maybe. One kept trying to hide behind Kirishan's leg. The other stared at everything with wonder. Ji-won could not help herself. She moved closer to get a better look. The cubs noticed her immediately. The shy one peeked out from behind its mother. The curious one took a step forward. Ji-won knelt down slowly, making herself smaller and less scary. She smiled. The curious cub came closer. It reached out a small paw and touched Ji-won's hoodie. The fabric must have felt interesting because the cub pressed its face against it and made a soft purring sound. Ji-won stayed very still. She could feel her heart beating fast with excitement. This was exactly the kind of behavior she studied. Kirishan noticed and frowned. She said something sharp in her own language. The cubs moved back quickly, their ears flat against their heads. Ji-won stood up and stepped away, not wanting to cause trouble. But she saw the curious cub looking back at her, its big eyes still full of interest. After the reception, Ji-won returned to her lab. She had work to do. She needed to finish a report about Thesian hatchlings and their social development. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. She sat at her desk, put on her headphones, and started typing. Hours passed. Ji-won got lost in her work the way she always did. She barely noticed when her friend Dayun Song sent her a message asking about lunch. She barely noticed when the station lights dimmed slightly, showing that evening cycle had started. She just kept working. Then the alarms started. Not the loud emergency alarms that meant danger. These were different. A steady beeping sound that meant something was wrong but not immediately dangerous. Ji-won pulled off her headphones and looked around. Her computer screen showed a message in red letters. Station lockdown in effect. Ji-won's door opened and Da-eun rushed in. Her friend wore her security uniform and looked worried. Taeyun was the station's chief of security, which meant she knew everything that happened on Aurora Station. Have you seen any Velhari cubs? Taeyun asked quickly. 2 of them. Small russet fur, big ears. Ji-won shook her head. Not since the reception this morning. Why, what happened? They're missing, Da-eun said. Disappeared from their quarters 3 hours ago. The Velhari are going crazy. They think someone took them. This is bad, Ji-won. Really bad. If we don't find those cubs before the treaty signing, the Velhari will think Earth is responsible. They might declare war. Ji-won felt cold fear in her stomach. War. Over missing children. She understood why the Velhari were upset. If someone's children disappeared, any parent would be terrified and angry. But why would anyone take them? And where could they be on a space station with security cameras everywhere? Dayun touched her earpiece, listening to something. Her expression got darker. Captain Cho wants all personnel to search their areas. Look everywhere. Under desks, in storage closets, anywhere small enough for cubs to hide. Call me immediately if you find anything. She turned and ran out of the lab. Ji-won stood up and looked around her laboratory. It was not very big. She had her desk, some filing cabinets, a few chairs, and shelves full of research materials. There were not many places to hide. She checked under her desk anyway. Nothing. She opened the closet. Just lab coats and equipment. She sat back down at her desk, feeling helpless. Those poor cubs, they must be so scared wherever they were. She hoped they were safe. She hoped someone would find them quickly. Ji-won reached into the front pocket of her hoodie to pull out her phone. Her hand touched something warm and soft. She froze. That was not her phone. Slowly, carefully, she looked down at her hoodie. The pocket in the front, the big kangaroo-style pocket, looked fuller than usual. Heavier. She had not noticed because she had been so focused on her work. But now that she paid attention, she could feel weight against her stomach. With shaking hands, Ji-won pulled open the pocket and looked inside. Two pairs of bright eyes stared back at her. The Vellery cubs were curled up together in her hoodie pocket, sleeping peacefully. Their small bodies were warm and soft. They were breathing slowly and calmly, completely relaxed. Ji-won's mind went blank with shock. The cubs were here, in her pocket. They had been there for hours, probably since the reception. They must have climbed in when she knelt down to look at them. She had been so distracted by work that she had not even noticed two living creatures sleeping against her body. One of the cubs yawned, showing tiny sharp teeth. Then it snuggled deeper into the pocket and went back to sleep. The other one opened its eyes, looked at Ji-won's face, and made a soft chirping sound. It did not seem scared at all. It seemed happy. Ji-won did not know what to do. She should call Dayun right away. She should tell someone that the cubs were safe. But something stopped her. Outside her lab, she could hear running footsteps and shouting voices. The Velhari warriors were searching, and they sounded angry. If they burst into her lab and saw their cubs in her pocket, what would they think? They would think she had stolen them. They would think a human had kidnapped their children. And they would not listen to explanations. Ji-won's hands hovered over her communication device. She needed to make a choice, and she needed to make it fast. The laboratory felt too small with so many people inside. Velhari warriors stood near the door, their weapons still ready. Captain Cho stood between them and Ji-won, trying to keep the peace. Ambassador Taeyang Kim looked like he wanted to disappear, and High Matriarch Kira-shan stared at her cubs with an expression that made Ji-won's heart hurt. It was the look of a mother who did not understand her own children anymore. "Give me my cubs," Kira-shan said. Her voice was quieter now, but still carried command. She held out her arms again. "Give them to me now," Ji-won nodded quickly. She wanted to cooperate. She wanted to show she was not a threat. Carefully, she lifted Rin, the brave cub, and held it toward its mother. Rin looked between Ji-won and Kira-shan, confused. Then it reached for its mother with small paws. Kira-shan took her child and held it close. Relief washed over her face. She buried her nose in Rin's fur, checking for injuries or strange smells. The cub chirped and nuzzled against her, clearly happy to be with its mother. But when Ji-won tried to hand over Kai, the shy cub, something went wrong. Kai's claws dug into Ji-won's hoodie. The cub made a high-pitched crying sound, the kind that small creatures make when they are scared. It refused to let go. "Kai, come," Kira-shan said firmly in her language. She reached for her child, but Kai pulled away and pressed its face into Ji-won's chest. The crying got louder. War leader Thrawn made a sound deep in his throat. It was not quite a growl, but close. The other warriors shifted, unsure what to do. This behavior was clearly very wrong in their culture. "What did you do?" Kira-shan demanded again. Her yellow eyes blazed with anger and something else. Fear, maybe. Fear that her child had been changed somehow. Cubs know their mother. Cubs always come to their mother. "You poisoned Kai's mind." "I did not," Ji-won said, her voice cracking. Kai was crying and clinging to her, but she could not comfort the cub without making things worse. "I swear on everything I am, I did nothing. I would never hurt a child." Then why does my child choose you over me? Kirishan's voice broke on the last word. And Jiwon understood then. This was not just about suspicion or politics. This was a mother whose heart was breaking because her baby did not want to come to her. Captain Cho stepped forward. Hi, Matriarch, please. Let us move to a medical bay. We can examine the cubs, examine Dr. Park, and figure out what is happening. Standing here arguing helps no one. Ambassador Tae-Yang Kim nodded quickly. Yes, a full medical examination. With witnesses from both sides. We can scan for chemicals, drugs, pheromones, anything that might explain this. Science will give us answers. Kirishan looked at her husband. Thran's face was hard, but he nodded slowly. They had to know the truth, even if they did not like what they might find. Very well, Kirishan said. But the human carries Kai. If we force the cub now, it will cause more distress. We will discover what this human did to make my child bond with her, and then there will be consequences. The group moved through the station like a strange parade. Jiwon walked in the middle, holding Kai carefully. The cub had stopped crying, but still clung tight to her hoodie. Felhari warriors surrounded them, weapons ready in case Jiwon tried to run. Captain Cho and Daon walked close by, both looking tense. Ambassador Tae-Yang Kim followed behind, talking urgently on his communication device. People stared as they passed. Word had spread quickly through the station. The missing cubs were found. A human had them. No one knew exactly what had happened, but everyone had opinions. Jiwon heard whispers. Did she kidnap them? The treaty is ruined. I heard she used some kind of mind control. Jiwon wanted to defend herself, to tell everyone the truth. But she stayed silent. Talking would only make things worse. She focused on the small warm weight in her arms and tried not to think about what would happen if they could not explain this. The medical bay was large and filled with equipment from a dozen different species. Each species had different biology, so the doctors needed different tools. A Thesian doctor waited for them. Dr. Sulara was tall and covered in smooth scales that shimmered green and blue. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She was known as one of the best medical researchers on the station. Hi, Matriarch, Dr. Sulara said, bowing her head respectfully. I understand we have an unusual situation. I will examine everyone involved and provide objective data. Please trust that I serve only the truth. Kirishan's tail lashed once, but she nodded. Thran watched everything with suspicious eyes. The warriors positioned themselves at all the exits. No one was leaving until they had answers. Dr. Solara started with the cubs. She used gentle scanners that made soft humming sounds. Rin, in its mother's arms, was calm and cooperative. Kai, still clinging to Jiwon, was nervous but allowed the doctor to work. The scanners showed information on screens that Jiwon could not read. Both cubs are healthy, Dr. Solara announced. No injuries, no signs of drug exposure, no chemical imbalances. Their stress hormones are actually lower than normal, which suggests they feel safe and comfortable. That is impossible, Thran said. They were missing for hours. They should be traumatized. The data does not lie, Dr. Solara replied calmly. These cubs slept peacefully for most of that time. Their heart rates show they were never in distress. Not until the moment of this confrontation. Kirishan looked at Jiwon with confusion. How could a human stranger provide more comfort than their own guarded quarters? Now I examine the human, Dr. Solara said. She approached Jiwon with a larger scanner. This will not hurt. It reads biological signatures, pheromones, electromagnetic fields. Please stand still. Jiwon stood as still as possible while holding Kai. The scanner moved around her body, making clicking sounds. Dr. Solara's scaled face showed concentration as she read the data. Her eyes widened slightly. Interesting, she murmured. Very interesting indeed. What did you find? Captain Cho asked. Did she use something on the cubs? No, Dr. Solara said slowly. But I am detecting unusual patterns in her biology. May I access the station's database? I need to compare this to other species. Ambassador Tae-Yang Kim nodded quickly. He typed commands into a console, giving Dr. Solara access to the Coalition's extensive biological records. The doctor worked in silence for several minutes, her scaled fingers flying over screens. Everyone waited. The tension was so thick Jiwon felt like she could not breathe properly. Finally, Dr. Solara looked up. Her expression was one of wonder mixed with disbelief. She looked at Jiwon like she was seeing her for the first time. Dr. Park did not manipulate the cubs, she announced, but she did affect them. All humans do, actually. We simply never noticed before. Explain. Kirishan demanded. Dr. Solara touched the screens, bringing up images of brain scans and chemical formulas. She showed them to everyone in the room. Young creatures across the galaxy share certain instincts, Dr. Solara explained. When they are very small, before they learn about danger, their brains recognize safety signals. Specific sounds, specific smells, specific warmth patterns. These signals evolved long ago before our species diverged. They are ancient and universal. She pulled up more data. Ji-Wan saw wave patterns and chemical structures. Most advanced species evolved past these primitive responses. Dr. Solara continued. As adults, we do not respond to them anymore. We learn to trust our own species only, but very young creatures still carry this ancient programming in their brains. What does this have to do with humans? Thrawn asked impatiently. Dr. Solara smiled, a strange expression on her reptilian face. She pointed at Ji-Wan. Humans did not evolve past these signals, she said. They kept them. Their heart rate, their breathing pattern, their body temperature, the pheromones they emit when calm, even the frequency of their voice when speaking softly. All of these match the ancient safety signals that young brains recognize. Silence filled the medical bay. Everyone stared at Ji-Wan. She looked down at Kai, who was now sleeping peacefully in her arms. The cub's small chest rose and fell with steady breaths. You are saying, Captain Cho said slowly, that humans naturally broadcast signals that make alien children think we are safe? Yes, Dr. Solara confirmed. Not just think, feel, at a level deeper than conscious thought. These cubs did not choose to trust Dr. Park. Their instincts told them she was a caregiver. Their brains interpreted her presence as safety itself. Kirishan's face went through several expressions. Anger faded to confusion, then to something like understanding. She looked at Rin sleeping in her arms, then at Kai sleeping in Ji-Wan's arms. Both cubs were equally content. This changes everything, Ambassador Tae-Yang Kim whispered. His mind was already racing through the political implications. Does this work on all species? A Vilhari warrior asked. Dr. Solara checked her data again, comparing multiple files. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with excitement. Based on these patterns, humans should trigger comfort responses in juvenile members of at least 70% of coalition species. Perhaps more. We would need to test, but the theory is sound. Ji-Wan felt dizzy. She was just one person wearing a comfortable hoodie, trying to do her research. She never wanted to be special or important, but now everyone was looking at her like she represented something bigger than herself, like she represented all of humanity's unexpected place in the galaxy. The news spread through Aurora Station like fire. Within hours, every being on the station knew about Dr. Solara's discovery. Humans were not just friendly or good diplomats. They were biologically designed to comfort the young of almost any species. It was not magic or manipulation. It was evolution. Ji-Wan sat in a conference room with Kai still in her arms. The cub had finally agreed to sit with its mother for a while, but only if Ji-Wan sat right next to them. Rin played with a toy nearby, occasionally coming over to pat Ji-Wan's leg before running back to its mother. The cubs seemed to think Ji-Wan was part of their family now. Captain Cho stood at the front of the room, showing information on a large screen. Ambassador Tae-Yang Kim sat at the table, looking less stressed than before but still worried. War Leader Thrawn stood against the wall with his arms crossed. High Matriarch Kirishan sat in a special large chair designed for Velhari bodies, watching everything with thoughtful eyes. Other beings had joined the meeting too. Ambassador Vrextall represented the Krilthan people. He looked like a giant insect with many legs and compound eyes. His species thought with pure logic and showed little emotion. Next to him sat representatives from 3 other coalition species, all curious about this discovery. I've been reviewing our records, Captain Cho said, touching the screen to show different reports. Over the past 2 years, we have had 17 incidents of alien younglings approaching human crew members. We dismissed them as coincidence or curiosity, but now we understand the pattern. The screen showed images and videos. A Krilthan larva following a human engineer. A Thesian hatchling sleeping next to a human medical officer. Young creatures from species Ji-Wan had never even heard of. All seeking out humans when given the chance. This explains much about human history, Ambassador Vrextall said in his clicking mechanical voice. Your species domesticated over 400 animal species on your home planet. We always wondered how one species could form bonds with so many others. Now we know. Your biology makes you universal caregivers. It explains other things too, Kirashan said quietly. She stroked Rin's fur as she spoke. Humans are the only species that consistently volunteers for rescue missions involving other species' children. You risk your lives to save younglings that are not your own. We thought you were foolish or trying to gain favor, but you cannot help yourselves, can you? Your instincts drive you to protect any child. Ji-won felt uncomfortable being discussed like she was not there, but Kirashan was right. Ji-won would risk her life to save a child without thinking. Any human would. They could not stand to see younglings in danger. The question is, Ambassador Taeyang Kim said, what do we do with this information? How does this change Earth's relationship with the Coalition? Silence filled the room. Everyone thought about the implications. This was bigger than just one scientist and two cubs. This was about humanity's role in the entire galaxy. Some will see this as a weapon, Thrawn said bluntly. Humans could use this ability to create dependency in other species. Make our children love you and you control our futures. That is a valid concern, Captain Cho admitted. We would need strict protocols, oversight, rules about how humans interact with alien younglings. Or, another voice said from the doorway, you could use this gift to bring peace. Everyone turned. Dr. Solara entered the room with her tablet full of data. She had been working all night, studying human biology and comparing it to hundreds of species. Consider this, Dr. Solara said, showing new information on the screen. Wars between species are fought by adults, but those adults have children. If those children grow up with positive experiences around humans, if they learn to trust humans as caregivers, they will carry that trust into adulthood. You want humans to raise other species' children? Thrawn asked, sounding offended. Not raise, Dr. Solara clarified. Teach. Care for. Protect. In mixed species settlements, human caregivers could work in schools, medical centers, community programs. They could help bridge cultural gaps. Children who grow up trusting each other rarely go to war when they become adults. Ambassador Vrextal's antennae twitched with interest. For his logical species, this made perfect sense. It was a practical solution to an old problem. The Krilton Collective would support this, he said. We have struggled with integrating colony species for generations. Human caregivers could help smooth those transitions. Kirashan looked down at her cubs. Both were now sleeping, one in her arms and one in Ji-won's. They looked peaceful and safe. As a mother, she understood the value of what was being discussed. As a leader, she saw the political advantages. The Velhari Empire has been at war with the Tarkesh Alliance for 3 generations, she said slowly. Our children are taught to hate them from birth. Their children are taught to hate us. What if both sides had human caregivers? What if our cubs learned to play together under human supervision? Thrawn made a doubtful sound, but even he could not argue with his wife's logic. Breaking cycles of hatred required breaking the chain early, with the youngest generation. This would require massive coordination, Captain Cho said. We would need to train humans for this role, create programs, establish rules and standards. It would take years, but it would be worth it, Ambassador Taeyang Kim said, his eyes bright with excitement. For the first time, he saw a future where Earth was not just a small player in galactic politics. Humans could become essential, not through military strength or advanced technology, but through something no other species could offer. Ji-won listened to all of this and felt overwhelmed. Yesterday, she had been a forgettable researcher studying videos of alien babies. Today, she was at the center of a plan that could change the galaxy. It was too much, too big, too important. What about the treaty? Thrawn asked suddenly. We came here to negotiate trade routes, not discuss human biology. The signing ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow. Kirashan smiled, showing her sharp teeth. It was not a threatening smile. It was one of genuine amusement. The treaty will be signed, she said, but we will add new terms. Earth will gain access to the Kiron Passage as planned. In exchange, Earth will provide trained human caregivers to Velhari colony worlds, 20 to start, more as your training programs develop. Ambassador Taeyang Kim blinked in surprise. This was better than he had hoped for. The Velhari were not angry anymore. They were offering partnership. Earth accepts, he said quickly, before anyone could change their minds. The other species representatives started talking among themselves, discussing similar arrangements for their own peoples. This was happening fast, too fast for normal diplomacy. But the evidence was clear and the benefits were obvious. Da Yun Song had been standing quietly in the corner, observing everything. Now she stepped forward and spoke to Captain Cho in a low voice. Captain, I just received a priority message from the border regions. The Tarkesh Alliance and the Velhari Empire had another skirmish. Both sides are requesting coalition mediators. Specifically, they both asked if humans could be involved in the negotiations. Captain Cho looked shocked. The information had spread that quickly. Already other species were seeing humans differently, seeing them as potential peacekeepers. Both sides asked for humans, Kirishan said, standing up with interest. The Tarkesh hate us. They would never agree to mediation unless they saw a real advantage. They specifically mentioned children. Daun continued, reading from her device. Both sides have casualties. Many orphans. They need people who can care for traumatized younglings from both species without bias. Everyone looked at Ji-won again. She felt her face get hot with embarrassment and pressure. Kai stirred in her arms and made a sleepy sound. Ji-won automatically adjusted her hold to keep the cub comfortable. Dr. Park, Captain Cho said gently, I know this is sudden. I know you never asked for any of this. But you are exactly what they need. You understand children of all species. You treat them with respect and care. Would you be willing to join a delegation to the conflict zone? Ji-won's throat felt tight. Part of her wanted to refuse, to run back to her laboratory and hide. But she looked down at Kai, sleeping so peacefully in her arms. She thought about orphaned cubs and hatchlings and larvae, all suffering because adults could not stop fighting. I will go, she said quietly. If I can help, I should try. Kirishan stood and walked over to Ji-won. The tall Velari looked down at the small human holding her child. Then, in a gesture that shocked everyone in the room, she placed her hand on Ji-won's shoulder. You saved my cubs, Kirishan said. Not from danger, but from fear and loneliness. You gave them comfort when they needed it. In Velari culture, this creates a debt that can never be repaid. From this moment, you are considered an honorary member of my clan. My cubs are your cubs. My family is your family. Thrawn stepped forward and placed his hand on Ji-won's other shoulder, showing his agreement. The other Velhari warriors in the room thumped their fists against their chests in unison, a sign of respect. Ji-won felt tears in her eyes. She had been so scared just hours ago, certain that her life was over. Now she was being honored by one of the galaxy's fiercest species. It did not feel real. We will accompany you to the conflict zone, Kirishan announced.
If